My name is William Branca. I'm the CEO and founder of PiVoT Business Solutions, and I am here with
Anthony Branca. I'm the managing director of the Consulting Group.
Consulting Group. Awesome. So if you couldn't tell, we both have the last name Branca. Does mean that we do know each other. I have known Anthony here for the last 23 years of my life. Mostly because you're my father, and you've had an incredible life story, so to say, so far. And it's only getting started in this world of consulting. I do find it hysterical, though, that you sent me your resume, and I'd never seen your resume before, and I was going through it, and I remember looking at it, and I'm just like, the companies you've worked at, the things you've done, you've always been in executive level positions pretty much your entire career.
Correct.
Like even starting out, you were not just in a position to start. You ended up in VP very quickly, and kind of grew from there in every company you've been in. And I from all the stories that I've heard over the years of the experiences you've had and kind of what you've done and accomplished, it's one of the main reasons why I was excited for the opportunity to kind of collaborate together with PiVoT Business Solutions specifically, was to be able to pick your brain and work side by side with you. Yeah, we're gonna make a bunch of money. It's gonna be cool. That's always the goal, right? But being able to work side by side with my father and kind of see a different side of you, because yeah, I mean, you're my dad, right? Our interactions have always been like, you know, holidays and family and doing stuff, but like being able to be on the business side and kind of experience that part of your life, just in the last 3-4 months that we've kind of been in business together has been incredible. Like the stuff I've learned already, and we haven't even really worked on any projects together yet, has been insane. And that's something that growing up I always wanted. I didn't know how or where that would come into play, or how I would be able to make that happen, or how we'd be able to work together. And the opportunity came about, and I'm super excited to be able to be taking it and using the opportunity and to have the opportunity to learn from someone as prestigious, sounds like such a hoity word, but like someone as successful and experienced as you in these areas and have done such incredible things. Why don't you give people kind of a background on who you are, what you've done, a little synopsis of what your life's looked like up until this point, and kind of what you're looking to accomplish as you move forward with PiVoT.
So first, on the mentoring side, what I wanted to say was, when you think about what you do over your career and the things that you learn, I started a business when I was 12 years old. Put myself through college, and all of that experience that I had over the last 40 some odd years, I've always passed along my experience. I've mentored multiple consultants, multiple professionals across the New York metro market, and actually all over the country the last 10 years. But I always wanted to take what I learned and be able to pass it along to people and let them learn. What better way to do that than actually doing that with my son? So I can take those 40 years of experience and pass it along to him so that he can learn from the things I've done. He can learn from the mistakes I've made, because let's be honest, we all make mistakes over the course of our lives in business, both professionally and personally. He can take those experiences and grow off of them. And then I can be that mentor later in life and sit side by side alongside of him so he can see what's happening. I can watch his growth and development and taking the business to the next level. Along with what my personal goal has been over the last 10 to 12 years consulting, is taking my experiences and helping small and medium-sized business owners across the country. And what I mean by that is help them to understand what they need to do to be successful, what they need to do to grow their own businesses, what they need to do to be more profitable, and to provide the foundation for themselves and for their families so they can live a prosperous life and grow off of that. That's what my goal was, and now I get to do that with you and pass that 40 plus years of experience along so you can see and you can take the company to the next level.
Yeah, it's a little daunting sometimes, some of the stuff you've done. Give them a background, like who are like yes, this is what we're doing, but like who are you? What have you done? Like what have you, the spark notes of kind of like your background.
So I'll go back to the beginning, right? So I said I started my own business when I was 12 years old. I actually put myself through college selling sports memorabilia and baseball cards. Why? It was a hobby. It was something I liked to do. I had a business knack. I kind of liked what was happening from a trade perspective. And I actually took that, expanded it, and invested a few $1,000s over the course of 2 or 3 years and turned that into a $50,000 to $100,000 business a year for the next 7 or 8 years. That helped me actually get through what I needed to do from a college perspective, because my own father actually left working for others and became an entrepreneur himself and started a business from scratch. I stepped back and gave him the opportunity to not have to deal with my cost of education. I took that upon myself so that he can grow his business, which he turned into a very successful home renovation and custom design business for over 30 years. Putting myself through school, I was always good with numbers. So I specialized in mathematics. I did a lot of physics work, which you did yourself.
I didn't know you were in physics.
I was in physics, primarily advanced level courses. But the leadership side of me, look, I was an athlete when I was younger. I played 3 sports. I lettered in 3 sports in high school from sophomore year on. I actually was on varsity teams as a freshman, and I was always in leadership roles, helping to steer the team, helping to develop the people underneath me, and to take the team to the next level. And being that athlete, I was always looking and trying to find ways to make myself better. I actually took that with me when I went to college and in the business world. So after finishing high school, I knew I liked numbers. I actually liked accounting. I took some classes when I was in high school, and I actually decided on doing that as a profession when I was in school. I went to a local university in New York called Pace University. I put myself through their BBA program in public accounting. 4 years, I interned at Pepsi, actually at PepsiCo, their corporate headquarters in New York, and then actually took a job with KPMG at the time, one of the big 4 public accounting firms. What that did, it gave me a foundation for accounting. It gave me a foundation for hard work and dedication. It gave me the foundation from professionalism on what you needed to do and how you needed to do things going forward. People say, what did you learn at KPMG? I learned how to conduct myself in a business environment, having business acumen, delivery, timelines, meeting expectations, exceeding expectations, and delivering real results to people around me from a day-to-day perspective. And the biggest thing for me was my key clients, and the biggest of which was GE Capital. I was there in a heyday when Jack Welch was running GE. GE Capital was expanding like crazy over a 2.5 year period. We did 100 debt offerings. We grew the business 200 or 300%. We were side by side with their leadership team, taking the business to the next level, looking at deals that they were doing, looking at expansions from a business perspective, signing off from an audit perspective. And I had the pleasure of meeting Jack more than once at the GE headquarters and listening to what he had to say and how things had to be. And it set the foundation for me going forward. So I was a big 4 public accountant. I worked on the audit side, but I knew that's not the direction I wanted to go. And I wanted to go into private accounting. I wanted to work for businesses on the accounting side. And I wanted to put myself into a controller CFO role eventually. How did I do that? Hard work. I rolled up my sleeves. I wasn't afraid to take on projects and work that was in front of me. I always strived to do more. And I didn't hesitate taking work from the managers and the leaders that I had in front of me. Case in point, I was with Nielsen for 10 years. And when I was with Nielsen, they were AC Nielsen at the beginning, and then they merged with Nielsen Media Research, and they were putting back together the Dun & Bradstreet businesses. They were owned by a Dutch company called V&U. The 2 businesses were merged together. We were owned by a Dutch multinational. I was part of a team that transitioned them to the US, and then we were bought by big PE. BlackRock and KKR took us private. So I spent a decade with Nielsen, and what did I do there? I was in their corporate reporting and analysis team. I did all their SEC reporting, their annual report, and then through hard work and working on special projects, the controller came to me and said, "Hey, I have this new startup. I'd really like you to work with one of our existing VPs to set the foundation for the accounting team." What did it mean? It meant looking at legal documents and understanding what the business was going to do. It was basically the internet measurement business. Yeah, I mean the start of the internet business.
When was this?
Early 2000. So right at the heyday. So when businesses were growing like crazy, there was tremendous investment in the internet environment.
So in the head of the first internet bubble.
Absolutely. We were right at the front end of it. So crazy expansion, money was being invested by firms across the globe. Billions and billions of dollars was being pumped into the ecosystem for it to develop and to grow. And what were we doing? Look, Nielsen is they're a measurement company. They were measuring TV ratings, they were measuring radio, they were measuring consumer products across the globe. So what Nielsen did was they set up a series of panels across 26 countries in the world to actually establish the measurement of the internet. Who was performing, how things were performing.
26 countries.
26 countries.
How fast did that rollout happen? Because you got to say, I mean, when people think nowadays we're going to launch in 26 countries, it's actually pretty easy if you're doing like an e-commerce, something like that. Amazon's everywhere.
Right.
So like you get into Amazon distribution chains, you're everywhere with a product. But to do like net ratings and to do ratings in general, I mean, the regulations and dealing with other countries, how fast did all that come together?
So to start with Nielsen net ratings, it was net ratings. The business was already established in the US and Canada, and they had 2 JV partners, one in Japan and one in France. So what they did was they came to Nielsen Corporate and said, we want you to take the business global. Why? Nielsen was in 132 countries, 68 different currencies. We worked multinational and had a platform that we could take global in a very short period of time. I worked on the corporate reporting and analysis team, so I was working with the controllers in all of the regions across the globe, all 5 continents. We were in practice, we were working from a day-to-day perspective, and I saw those people and worked with those people all the time. So when they came to me and said, there's this opportunity, I just went, wow, I'm gonna hit the ground, I'm gonna hit the business at the ground up. We were literally legal documents. There was an established US business in the US market. They needed to take it global. So we actually took the measurement business that they had and we created entities across 26 countries in the world, 18 to start. And within 16 months, we were up and running with panels and operational in 16 countries globally.
Wow.
South America, Central America, Asia, and Europe. African markets were small at the time. It didn't make any sense because the internet really hadn't taken off in Africa. So we launched in those 3 continents and took it out to 18 different countries in less than 16 months.
Wow.
We went from 0 employees to 450 in less than 18 months.
That's crazy. And like that was in the days where you were just like hard coding cookies onto websites.
That's exactly what was happening. We had 35 people that were in a black box in Silicon Valley that were actually doing that hard coding and establishing cookies on the panelist hardware across the globe. So Nielsen's business was putting software into their computers and actually tracking the data that they were doing. Wow. So we knew everything about that family, and most of the time it was families in those countries.
Hold on, so you guys had computers for clients?
We actually put the software on the computers to track what they did on a day-to-day basis.
Wow.
24/7, 365. We knew what they were doing, how they were doing it, and where they were going, and what they were looking at. And
did these people get paid? So this is something that I always was interested about with Nielsen companies and Nielsen families. You hear the term, not as much anymore because big tech can see all your information anyway. But as someone in a cybersecurity mindset, how was that? Like they just signed away the rights for like a free computer, or was it like
they actually didn't even get a free computer? They actually received gift cards, some type of monetary compensation, free internet access for them to actually provide that data.
Really?
And a lot of the Nielsen families, they weren't monetized to do the work. They felt it was a moral obligation for them to help and for people to understand the direction that the country should go in. They did that with the TV ratings, with radio ratings, and consumer products research so that you knew where they were going and what they were doing. And they were demographically proved ecosystems where they would take a cross function of what a country would look like in the panels that they created.
That's crazy. So you guys basically were just installing software onto products and saying, okay, like, and people would use it as they would use it. Do you run into any problems with the beginning of the internet? Because I'm sure, like, I know some of the first websites that were ever created, and I'm like during the internet boom, there were thousands of companies that were popping up. How were you guys keeping pace with tracking? Because you can have software on a computer, but if you internally don't know what the website they're going to is, and there's no way to interface with that, how are you tracking what people?
That's why we had 20 to 30 people that were sitting in a black box, and all they did was code cookies all day.
Wow, that's crazy.
And then here the most interesting part is, so we had this crazy growth, right? So we went from 0 employees to 450 employees within 16, 18 months. And we're going full gangbusters. Everything's moving like crazy. And then what happens? Overnight, we start to have some small collection issues. We notice that some of the clients aren't paying us anymore. Doesn't seem to make any sense.
They were paying you for information?
They were paying us for the data that we were getting from the people that were actually our panelists. Okay. So consumer product companies, internet businesses, because they wanted to know what they should be focusing on for them to expand their own businesses.
Interesting.
We notice a collection issue. I go to our management team, we start to talk about, hey, wait a second, we're starting to see some collection issues. We never had problems before. What was happening is the funds were starting to dry up because there were problems in the businesses, in the tech centers around the globe, and the funding, as the funding started to dry up, because they didn't have a lot of revenue coming in, they weren't profitable, they weren't able to sustain their own cost structure. What happened? Bubble bursted. So 22 months after we start the business, the entire internet imploded. The whole thing. Like 70% of the businesses we were working with went out of business. What did you do? What do you do then, right? So we tightened our belt. We shrunk our markets down. We let people go so that we can continue to maintain what was happening from a day-to-day perspective and from on the internet side. But the trajectory of revenue and growth, although Nielsen was investing in the business, they didn't want to pump tons of cash in because honestly, nobody knew what was going to happen. We didn't know the direction that it was going to go in. We didn't know what was happening. But what I got to do is I learned a lot of things at an early age. One was how to scale and grow a business internationally. So we were in those 18 markets and in three different continents. That was one. Two, I had to work with and had to learn how to work with work councils in those 18 markets when we had to shut the businesses down. Because what happens in Europe and in South America is when you close a business, you have to pay people severance. And in Europe, it's significant. It's not weeks, it's not days, it's years. Years. So they would get months of severance for every year of service that they had. So in some cases, it could be 2 or 3 years worth of work for those people. What did we do? Two things. Sometimes we had to let people go, and other times we were able to use Nielsen's ecosystem to actually put people back into Nielsen jobs across the globe, which mitigated some of the expenses that we had from a business perspective.
That's great. See, I remember like bits and pieces of when you worked at Nielsen. I was young. 5?
Not even when I started in that business, you weren't even born yet. Your brother was.
But I remember a distinct time. I think we were in Disney World. Mm-hmm. I remember walking through the park and hearing people calling out your name.
Exactly.
I thought that was wild. Can you tell me like a little bit about that story if you can?
So we were in the middle of a transaction, and the former CEO of Nielsen was looking for information about the company that I had done work with, and he was looking for a model. So he actually had an admin reach out, and because I was off the grid in Disney, which normally didn't happen, but after 24 months of pure craziness and not taking any vacation, we took a week to actually decompress, took the kids down to Disney, and they actually paged me to get on a call to handle some of the questions about the business and what we were doing.
Really? That's crazy.
That was one. The second was getting a phone call when the internet was imploding that we needed to redo our forecasts and budgets. Now, I was the international controller for Nielsen Net Ratings. What that job was doing the day-to-day accounting, and I used a shared service team to keep our costs down to do the day-to-day accounting for the business, leveraging and using Nielsen's infrastructure to actually develop and provide the analytics, the financial statements, and the KPI data we needed to run the business. So we did it. We were very lean from a business perspective, and we had a small fee from Nielsen to do the work because it really wasn't a lot of volume add to them from a day-to-day perspective. So we were able to leverage their ecosystem. But when they came to me, when we saw the problems in the business, I literally had to get on a plane, fly to Europe, bring the business leadership together, and redo the budgeting and forecasting that we had done literally 6 months earlier because our environment had imploded. And what it was I pulled the leadership team together. We sat down and went department by department to decide on the areas we needed to cut, what we needed to do, and how we needed to impact the business so that we could survive through a very turbulent time from an internet perspective.
Okay, so international controller, Nielsen Net Ratings. You end up leaving that company through just different job changes and stuff that you wanted to make. You wanted to make a change. Where'd you end up after Nielsen?
So actually, Nielsen Net Ratings, I actually went back to corporate office.
You went back to the corporate office.
And in the corporate office, I actually changed their budgeting and forecasting systems. I changed their budgeting and forecasting process. I took the knowledge that I had got at Nielsen Net Ratings and I had learned at AC Nielsen proper and took it back to the corporate office. I worked in their consolidation and reporting team. I helped them with the budgeting and forecasting systems. And then I actually worked when BlackRock and KKR took Nielsen private. I actually worked with the PE firms to do predecessor, successor, guarantor, and non-guarantor financial statements for the company and finished out my career with Nielsen doing that work. And then I made a decision from a professional perspective. So everybody comes to a point in their lives. I'd been with the company 10 years. I was global controller and now senior director of finance for their corporate office. But they wanted me to stay in corporate. And I knew I really liked running businesses. So I actually took a chance, stepped back, started to talk to some people in the industry, people around me, some of the people that I had worked with over the course of 5 to 10 years. And a recruiter helped me find a role at an alternative investment company called Icon Investments, which is now Scion Investments. And Icon was having problems with their financial reporting systems. They were 2 years in arrears with the SEC with 2 of their active funds. They were in trouble. And they needed somebody to come in and revise, revamp, and change the way they did their corporate reporting and analysis and how they did their financial statement review, which I had done for 10 years at Nielsen.
So you ended up at Icon before you were at Fortune Brands?
No, I ended up, so my timeline was KPMG, okay, then Fortune Brands, then Nielsen.
Okay, cool. So then you end up at Icon.
Then I end up at Icon. So I actually interviewed and got a role as SVP of Finance for Icon Investments, now Scion Investments, which was an alternative investment company.
So by alternative investments,
they're taking capital from home office broker-dealers, using that capital to actually invest and provide alternative financing to companies. So what are the assets that they finance? Container ships, cargo carriers, freight lines, the containers that go on boats and on rail lines, rail cars, manufacturing equipment. Those are the type of things that Nielsen handled, that Icon handled. So Icon handled those type of investments and those type of assets from a day-to-day perspective. And it was a global business where we provided financing from Singapore to France to Canada to the US at various businesses that needed that capital to invest from a business perspective.
So what was that business like? I remember that one a little bit better because I remember coming into your office and you had a really nice office back then at Icon. Not that office matters at the end of the day. I work out of a bedroom in my house.
So it was a 5-year period, and what we needed to do when I went in is the team was struggling with their day-to-day operations and their workflow. So the first thing I did is I went in, I assessed the team that was there. I worked with the people side by side. I got their reporting done for the year, and then I knew I needed to expand the team, and the company was ready to make that investment. So I went out and found a couple of technical accountants to help with the day-to-day workflow, and then we developed the staff that they had, and then hired and brought in people from the outside to augment the people that were there, and we basically hired strengths in the weaknesses that were in the organization. So over the 5-year period, we grew the team from 15 to 27 people on the accounting and finance side. We increased the asset base from approximately $2 billion to almost $10 billion in assets over that time. And the function from an accounting perspective was to provide leadership with the data they needed on a timely basis to understand and to help process the flow of financials through the funds, provide a tight-knit team that we were able to look at from an efficiency perspective. So we didn't overhire people to do the work. We were about process improvement. We were about streamlining processes. We were about getting the reporting done in a timely manner and doing it accurately and timely. We moved from a tier 3 CPA firm to a big 4 firm. That big 4 firm came in and we had to run audits. So from an audit perspective, we filed 8 to 10 10Ks a year. That's
10Ks?
significant, 10Ks. And we did 6 to 8 10Qs on a quarterly basis. So we were a reporting machine because of the amount of work that we were putting out and the amount of financial statements that we had to do on a monthly and quarterly basis.
Wow. And so what were some of the key takeaways you had from your time at Icon as far as like things you learned, but like processes as building out that kind of a company versus stuff that you learned from Fortune Brands, from Nielsen?
So the biggest thing for Icon was we had these active funds, right? So there were 6 or 8 funds, but the accounting for those funds was being done differently. So the first thing I did was we solidified what we were doing from a close perspective. Same close calendar, same workflow. I changed the work papers and how things were happening so that we were seamless across the entire organization. If everybody was doing the work the same way, maybe not at the same speed, but the same way, the teams could help each other. I developed 3 transaction teams that would handle 2 funds each. A fund that was at the tail end of its life, a fund that was at the beginning of its life, and maybe a fund that was in the middle of its life. So fund lives ran 6 to 12 years. Why did we do that? Because it gave the team good experience across the gamut of work that they were doing. And by them having the same workflow, it flatlined what we did so people can help and assist in different areas. So we had a lot of functionality and a lot of flexibility with how people handled the work from a day-to-day perspective. And if somebody needed help, I always had somebody on the other team that can work side by side with someone to get through a project or a process or a problem that was coming up. So we started to train and to develop our talent from within. At the beginning, I hired some senior people to come in and work side by side with me, technical experts, real strong accountants. After the second year, we stopped hiring people at that VP level, and I started to hire basically staff and senior accountants, and we developed all of our talent the next 3 years from within and promoted our people from within because they needed that background, that experience in what we did from a day-to-day perspective to continue the growth and development of the company. So it was about teamwork. It was about people working side by side. And the other thing that I really spent a lot of time was developing the talent inside my organization. How did I do that? Roundtable sessions. It was the way people look at things from an open office perspective. With the exception of our VPs and our directors, everybody was on an open floor plan. They were communicating with each other on a daily basis. And even with that said, a lot of them were in the offices, in particular me as a CFO, I'd have roundtable discussions because, let's be honest, if you have 20 or 30 people on your team and you pull 4 or 5 of your lead experts in a specific area into a room, you're going to come up with better decisions. We weren't afraid, and I got
it's like masterminding.
Yes, think tank-like. When we put those people in there, 2 things happened. One, I made sure that people weren't afraid to speak their mind and to express what they were seeing in the room. That didn't happen at the beginning because, let's be honest, in most organizations, senior people don't want to hear what a junior person has to say. But honestly, the smartest thing we did was open the doors up to our senior accountants and our managers. Why? Because they were boots on the ground doing the work on a day-to-day basis. So they were able to problem solve what happened from a process perspective at the ground level. It made a big impact on us and the way we looked at things because, one, it kept us closer to what happened from a day-to-day perspective. So we were able to see what our people were going through. And then 2, we were able to strategize when we were looking at deals, how much work it was going to be when we were adding those type of deals into our workflow. So by working together as a group, we were able to keep things more efficient. We were able to do things cleaner and more efficiently. And we had a team that could cross-functionally work with each other. So there was never a problem that came up that we weren't able to handle as a group.
Are you a small to medium-sized business looking for cybersecurity, digital marketing, SEO, or production solutions, as well as
management consulting?
Please reach out to us at info@pivotbusinesssolution.com or at the link below to schedule your 30-minute free consultation with us to see how we can help your business. All right, so we're getting out of Icon. and we're getting into your next position. So you helped Icon, you developed these structures, you really focused on management development and internal employee development at this company, really focused on nurturing a culture within, these roundtable masterminds to get ideas circulating internally.
And providing real financial data back to the management team so we can make strategic decisions to drive growth inside the business. Look, we were a deal company. So we were looking at deals on a daily, weekly, monthly, and annual basis. Those deals we needed to look at, we needed to account for them quickly, efficiently. We needed to work side by side with our sales team so that they understood what the real value was in that organization. Then we'd sign off on it and we'd make a decision on if we were gonna accept that deal or not.
So from Icon, you were there for 6 years?
5 years.
5 years. From there, you kind of took your trajectory into a different direction, to a different sector of industry, let's say. What kind of drove you in that direction? What drove you into that more tech market space?
So, I always go back to what I did at Nielsen Net Ratings, why it was the start of the internet. It was fun, it was exciting, it was crazy growth. And I liked working at the start of a business and taking it to the next level. And then it was interesting. I left Icon. I took some time off to clear my head because, look, 5 years in alternative investment / hedge fund world is a lot of hours, a lot of time. I took some time to cool down, we'll say, and to kind of decide on the direction I wanted to go in. And a gentleman had reached out to me about this tech startup in New York. So Brian O'Kelly came to me talking about AppNexus and Bruce Cooperman in the summer of 2012. And I was with AppNexus until the summer of 2016. And they came to me because they were trying to grow and develop their finance and accounting organization. Bruce needed help. He was looking for a proven leader in the accounting space to come in and help him blow out that team and to eventually take the company public. And we had those conversations about the direction Brian wanted to take the business in. So after a series of interviews, I met with the team, I met with Brian, I met with Bruce Cooperman a couple of times. I decided on moving forward and getting back into the tech side of the industry, which is what I did when I was at Nielsen Net Ratings. The reality is I really enjoyed that time. It was exciting. There was craziness going on a daily basis. And I saw that same opportunity with AppNexus. I went in August of 2012. I was employee 173. And people are like, well, you were in that second 200 of employees. Just to give you perspective, by 2016, we had grown to 1,600 employees.
Wow.
So almost 10 times the number of people we had.
That's crazy.
We went from 2 markets that we were in globally to 18 to 24 markets globally. Our last acquisition put us in 24 markets. We were in Europe, Asia, the North America, and then we bought a South American business my last year there, and we launched in Chile, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, and really started to grow that business.
That's when the South American market opened up. So this is the most, I think, influential job you had on me. Mm-hmm. I remember growing up, I was always the tech kid. I was the nerd. I would play with the tech stuff. But I remember meeting the CIO or CTO of AppNexus, and him just talking about algorithms and AI and kind of breaking down that was my first exposure to social media marketing. And this is early days Facebook, early days websites. Facebook hadn't even launched an ad platform yet.
No, they had not.
So there were no ads on Facebook yet.
Facebook had actually come to us to buy our ad platform.
Well, and this is the interesting thing is that if you think about early days, and this is why full circle for me and for you of ads and stuff like that is mm-hmm. Now Nielsen is basically out of business because every person today could go online and buy demographic data about any demographic they want.
It's all real-time online.
Real-time online, collected everywhere constantly. So you were at the beginning of both of these renaissances of data collection on the internet and then into this renaissance of social media marketing. That's where I got my first exposure to it. I also remember sitting there one day just I remember the take your kid to work day.
Mm-hmm.
All the kids, they organize these events and all these things. And I like halfway through, like we were walking by the tech guys and I remember just peeling off the group. Like I just ended up in the tech room with all the coders. And I remember like a page going out. Cause like, I remember you finding me as like, where you been? Cause they were going crazy because they thought they lost me somewhere. But I think I spent 4 hours that day, like just going over code and programming with the tech team. And I really, like, I was already into cybersecurity. I was already doing like bug bounties and stuff like that. But it was that got me inspired about digital marketing, SEO, advertising.
Brian was very influential, and he really wanted to run the company the way he felt it would be most enlightened from a personnel perspective.
Enlightened?
It was energetic. He wanted people to think out of the box. He really wanted them to be true entrepreneurs from a day-to-day perspective. And look, I was a corporate finance guy. At Icon, we were in jacket and tie every single day. Suits, okay? White shirts, buttoned up.
You wore that to AppNexus.
So I go to my interview at AppNexus, and Brian comes running in the room in cargo shorts, concert t-shirt, sweaty in flip-flops, because he just had he was running late and ran into the office to have the interview with me. And there's me sitting in a suit and tie. Brian laughed, said, you can't dress that way. To be honest, I didn't own a pair of jeans, because everything from a finance perspective, in the industry that I was in, we were suits and ties to everything. And you had a sport coat on the weekends. It was true banking from a financial services perspective.
So suits and ties.
Yeah. So Brian's like, you got to come in casual. So my first day, I get hired. I go in the first day. I'm wearing khakis, a button-down shirt, a pair of shoes. I walk into No, I didn't have a sports coat, but I just had a shirt, a pair of slacks on. I walk into work, and after 2 days, Brian was like, you can't wear that. Like, throw on a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, come into work with a pair of sneakers, but this isn't going to go. So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I go home that night. I'm like, I don't have jeans in my closet. I find a pair of khaki shorts I used to wear on a golf course. And I'm like, all right, I got to wear something. I put on a golf shirt, and then I grab a backpack, because, AppNexus was big on backpacks. So we had
What do you mean big on backpack?
We had a Patagonia backpack that we carried our stuff in, because we branded our business. So I grabbed my book bag.
You guys were true, like, Silicon.
Absolutely. No, we were Silicon Alley. We were not Silicon Valley.
But
Silicon Valley's in California.
Yeah.
We were on 23rd Street in New York in a loft building, and we had open floor space.
It's true. The tech startup, the tech, everything's branded, and we're together.
Oh, yeah. And it was all open floor plan. We had 150 people sitting in a room that probably shouldn't have had more than 50, and we were all side by side on tables working.
So your day walking in there, how weird was it walking in with shirts, a t-shirt?
How about people wearing pajamas to work? Seriously. So I go in.
That was the beginning of.
So I go in, and Brian's like, you can't wear that anymore, and he's like, go downstairs, grab a pair of jeans. I'm a pretty big guy, right? So the jean store downstairs was 7 for all mankind. And if anybody knows about jeans, those are for tall, thin guys. Was not working for me. I told Brian that same thing. He started laughing. I was like, look, I promise you tomorrow I'll come in more casual. So I go home. I'm like, and the boys are in school, right? So they're getting on the bus in the morning. I'm leaving to catch a train to go into New York. And I lived in Westchester County. So I come out with shorts on, a t-shirt, a golf shirt over it, and I got my book bag. And the kids are laughing because they see me leaving, and I pull to the end of the driveway. And as a joke, we took a picture of me getting on the bus with them going to high school, because that's how I looked.
Absolutely.
Like I was going to high school. We had a good laugh out of it. And then
I did think it was one of the raddest things, though. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
Not having to wear a suit and tie, although I like wearing suits and ties.
So I jump on a train. I go down to Manhattan. I take the subway down to 23rd. I walk into the office. And then we had our meetings, and we were doing some different things. And I go walking by, we called it the fishbowl. We had an inside office. We had an inside conference room. It had glass on 3 sides and a whiteboard in the back. And Brian was talking to some of the people on the tech side, and he looks up and goes, oh my God. And he stops the meeting, comes running out. He's like, all right, dude, that was awesome. He's like, complete transformation. Immediately he goes, no more suits and ties, no more slacks. He goes, in the winter you can wear jeans, but I need you to do this going forward because you fit right in with everybody. And look, that kicked off what we were doing from a day-to-day perspective. Now, AppNexus was in hyper growth, and we were hiring 5 to 10 people a month. It went to 10 to 20 people on a monthly basis. What were we doing?
Is that a lot?
Yeah, like think about infrastructure, right? We're a lean, mean tech company. We don't have real infrastructure yet. We're hiring people and trying to onboard them, and we don't have the staff to get them trained and to understand what it was.
There's no process.
Well, two things. They had to learn who we were as a business, what our core values were as a company, and the vision that Brian had going forward. And there was nobody there to train them to do it. So when we were hiring people at the beginning, they were kind of thrown into the teams to learn about the business because we hadn't developed what we needed to do from a people processing perspective and from a people development perspective to bring them on board. Over the course of the 5 years and having the right HR people involved, we'll call it our people team, they actually were able to structure how we were hiring and onboarding people so that we became a well-oiled machine of bringing 20 to 30 people on a month and moving them through the process.
Wow.
What was my job? My job was to develop and train a finance team that could support the growth. And people say, what kind of growth are we talking? We're talking about a platform that had a few $100 million on a monthly basis going across the platform. When I left the company, it was billions of dollars. Billions of dollars going across the platform.
Holy.
Right. So how do you handle those transactions from a day-to-day perspective? We built out the systems. We put new systems in place. We built out our infrastructure. We hired and trained people to handle the growth and the development that we're having on a day-to-day perspective. And most importantly, we needed to be able to provide that data to the management team timely and accurately because they needed to make decisions real time. Why? Because of that growth, we always had to be scaling to develop what we were doing from a business perspective.
So that really that kind of taught you how to put in systems to onboard people.
And to scale a business as it was going through hyper growth.
That's incredible. And so now I'm always a nerd, but billions of dollars. Did anyone ever pay in checks? You ever have a $100 million check somewhere that you had to go cash?
The only time I saw a crazy check like that was going back earlier in my career to Fortune Brands. Fortune Brands actually had a tobacco business they owned called Gallagher Tobacco. It was based in the UK. And I was there as they were transitioning. Gallagher Tobacco actually bought itself from Fortune Brands. When
Bought
they
itself?
Bought itself. They actually financed the transaction and bought the business.
Wow.
So they actually, it was a check that was, if I recall correctly, 1.8 billion pounds.
1.8 billion pounds?
Right. And the chief accounting officer came to me and said, wow, this is a lot of money to transact at once.
Was it a check?
No, it actually wasn't a physical check. It was a wire transfer, but we had to process the wire transfer on my workstation at the office.
So your computer had
1.8, I think it was 1.8 billion pounds.
Holy
at the time.
crap.
And the chief accounting officer was standing next to me because he was the only one, with the exception of our CEO,
With the off key.
with the authorization to actually sign off on that transaction.
Holy
It was
shit.
pretty crazy.
So you're sitting there and you're just looking at these. That's wild.
That's the kind of money where you could disappear and buy a country somewhere.
Yeah, you buy a country. Yeah, literally. And Elon Musk, yeah, I'm taking that. Goodbye.
And that was back in the mid 90s.
Holy crap.
Well, actually late 90s.
Okay, so AppNexus. What are some of the key? So that's crazy. But getting back to AppNexus, what were some of the key takeaways for you? Because we're coming you're in there. You change environments. You're able to flex into environments that way. Now I see you mostly in what I call business casual for you, but the rest of the world calls business. Because that's a whole nother discussion we could talk about, the decline of corporate America and the decline of the workforce. That's a whole nother area specific to my generation that I'd like to get into at a different time. But you're business casual wherever you go. Jacket, slacks, button up.
So I went from being
you're in AppNexus.
Right, but I went from being one of the younger people at the table in all of the prior companies I worked for to being the seventh oldest person in the entire company.
How did that
So you went from, I went from being that young guy in the room managing and working with business leaders to being the elder statesman. So there was only a few people that were older than me inside the organization. Brian was younger than me.
Oh my gosh.
And the people that we were working with, we had some of the brightest people in the world working for AppNexus.
Wow.
But they were young. So you had to adapt your management style so that you could help them understand what they needed to do to get the work done. And also understand that, look, we were in finance. We had timelines and deadlines, unlike a lot of the other departments. So we had to have a structured program with this young team that was developing and growing with the business in a tech culture. So it was super chilled and laid back, but we also still, unlike everybody else, we had real deadlines that we had to deliver. So you had to balance the workflow. So it was a work hard, play hard group. We made sure that we got things done timely, but we also had a good time in what we were doing.
So you were VP of Finance there for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then that last year, you moved into more of a strategic partnership role.
Right. So the business went through a transformation. Bruce actually left the business. We actually brought a new CFO in who had a lot of background in the industry to help Brian take the company and get the company either purchased or take it private or take it public. And I moved into a M&A role. So mergers and acquisitions, because we were in hyper growth. We started to buy other businesses and bring them in. So Brian and John asked me to go in and actually help do the transition and the due diligence on deals that we were looking at. And I worked on 4 or 5 projects and deals over the course of 18 months. We bought businesses ranging from $10 million, $10 to $25 million US to $500 million transaction where we bought a multinational business across Europe. And then we bought a South American business for $25 million.
So that's kind of where you learned the merger and acquisition.
Due diligence on deals. Now I did due diligence work when I was at Icon, where we were doing transactions on a daily basis, but I was going in and looking at real businesses, operating businesses, understanding what they were doing, looking at their financial statements, doing comparative analysis, and then actually pricing the deal based on what we were looking at from a business perspective.
Wow.
We were able to save the company millions of dollars from a value perspective. And then I was the person that was leading on the finance side, how to integrate that business into the AppNexus culture, which meant working with the people on the ground in the new business that we were purchasing, flying across the globe to different countries to talk to them about who we are, what we were doing, and then bringing them into the family so that they understood where their place was in the organization and what they needed to do on a go-forward basis. And then on the transaction side and our client side, I was actually the rep in South America, and I was the face of AppNexus working with our commercial clients in that market, so they knew that there was a parent in the US that was actually working and supporting the people in South America.
That's incredible. And so from that, you started to make another transition.
I did.
So you made a decision after a year in that role that you kind of wanted to explore other avenues.
We actually had 2 things happen. The first was I was ready for the next role for myself from a professional perspective, and we had a problem with one of the algorithms. So there were arbitrageurs in our network that were creating artificial bids in the environment. So there were companies that were bidding millions of bids on a daily basis to only purchase a small number of ad space in platforms because it matched their demographics.
Okay.
So they're artificially increasing the amount of traffic on the web platforms.
What does that mean?
So instead of normal traffic where you get a couple of hundred bids for maybe 5 million spots on websites, they were bidding on everything in the network to pay half a penny to a penny for that ad space that they were arbitraging into $1 or $1.50 because it matched the demographics for the type of ads that they wanted to place.
So they were basically artificially inflating the entire cost across the entire platform.
Absolutely, and creating volume that wasn't there.
How were those transactions didn't go through?
No, they went through, but they were bidding on everything just to get a small percentage that matched the demographics.
And then they would just let the other space go.
And it would just go to other people.
Interesting. So that was a whole issue with.
So when we saw that and found the problem, it actually depressed our market. And we went from high-flying, crazy numbers to flatline from a revenue perspective. When you flatline in a growth industry, it actually takes the cap off of the business. And we actually consolidated and actually let go of some people. And for the first time in the history of the company, we consolidated and we took out some of the infrastructure and no more deals. So no more deals, you don't need a VP of M&A.
Well, I'd seen this, I'd heard this a lot, especially in the tech world. That's my entire background is, as a startup, you never make revenue. The goal is not to bring in money. Because the minute you bring in profit, it's never going to be enough for anyone that comes in to buy the company.
So that it's to grow top line, not grow bottom line.
Yeah, well, but the problem is that you can value yourself at whatever you want to value yourself when you have no real numbers coming in. Mm-hmm. The minute you have real numbers coming in, it's the same thing you just said. Things can change, then all of a sudden that valuation tips down, and you go from being worth whatever you're worth to being worth half of that because you're not growing like this anymore.
3 to 5 billion down to $1 billion.
Yeah. And there's no mergers and acquisitions anymore.
No.
So deals fall out.
When capital dried up, because we weren't growing at 30 to 100% a year, capital dries up. There's no reason to do any more M&A. No more M&A. The fun part of what I was doing from a day-to-day perspective went away.
You were just doing the bullshit, like...
I was doing the day-to-day workflow, and that wasn't where I wanted to be, and it wasn't what I wanted to do at that point in my life.
So what'd you transition to?
So I actually stepped away from corporate America and started my own consulting practice. Mm-hmm. And I worked with businesses and covered multiple functions across the New York metro market over the course of the next few years. I did some interim roles from a controller, CFO perspective. I worked with and supported a number of different businesses in the area, and then we made a decision to move ourselves down to Florida.
Yeah, you did follow me.
Right.
When I had originally...
You followed your brother.
I followed my brother. So jumping into me a little bit, I was doing a bunch of stuff internally for myself. I was doing tech stuff, and I ended up doing a lot of work in a science research field, focusing specifically on solar physics. And I made the decision to come down to Florida for college. My brother was already down here. I liked the weather. The views were really nice. So I decided to come down to Florida for college. Came down. Some of the original things I was supposed to be doing at college ended up shifting and changing. Mm-hmm. So what I originally thought I wanted to do is solar physics. I got exposed enough in that world, thank God, to see what life was like for scientists and see what that kind of livelihood is. And I made the decision that that wasn't for me. Because you basically are teaching a class to make 50 grand a year, 30 grand a year. And if you want to make anything more than that, you'd have to be bidding constant research grants. And I just saw the way that people were living. I was like, it's not for me, not my kind of life.
And you live grant to grant.
And you live grant to grant. And I was never that kind of person that wanted to live that way. So I made a transition into cybersecurity and just programming, something I'd already done and been doing professionally for 4 years at that point. Mm-hmm. And I came down to college. My college stint wasn't as long as I'm sure you probably wanted it to be. I ended up dropping out of college after 2.5 years because of a number of different things, politics at the university, and I was basically not learning anything. I was in classes where they were teaching stuff that was what was current in the industry 5 years before I got into it, so 10 years before I was learning it. And I was sitting there arguing with professors, like, I'm in the industry, this is what we're doing, and you're teaching stuff that is not applicable anymore, and I was getting frustrated.
It wasn't relevant to what was happening from the marketplace perspective.
It was 5 years, 10 years behind, so I made the jump.
When Will was making that transition to Florida, we decided on a family with both boys in the state. My daughter wanting to make a change, we decided on moving to Florida. And what did I do from a professional perspective? We got our stuff together. We moved from New York down to Florida, and then where do I want to go from a career perspective, and what do I want to do? I actually decided on going back to work for a consulting company, a small business consulting firm in Central Florida. It was literally 10 minutes from the house that we lived in.
Not that you were ever at the office.
No. So for that next time in my life, I actually spent 5 years on the road. And what I mean by the road is I mean flying all over the United States, from St. Louis to Maine to Florida. I had one Florida client the entire time I was there. Guess where I was going most of the time? New York, Boston, Chicago, Indianapolis, Cincinnati.
You knew everybody on the plane. You knew every pilot.
And when was I doing this traveling? During COVID. So when everybody else was home in their house with their family, I was literally on 3 to 4 planes, sometimes eight planes a week, traveling around the country, working with small businesses, just like some of the people that are watching this podcast now. And what were we doing? We were working side by side with business owners to help them change the way they looked at and the way they managed their business. Look, with 25 years of experience, I wanted to take what I learned and I wanted to help other people do that. And 60-something successful clients later, it was about making change and driving change inside of an organization, helping them understand the things that they needed to do, driving operational metrics, KPIs inside their organization, helping their teams learn to understand what they needed to do to grow and help develop the business. And bottom line, get your profit. Because, I hate to say this, most small business owners, they operate on a small profit margin or no profit at all. And I can tell you, a lot of the clients that I had, and some of you are probably watching this podcast, you guys perfected the art of breaking even. And I know you're laughing right now, but that's the reality.
The art of breaking even.
They broke even every year. They made a little bit of money, but they never achieved the goals that they had as a business because they can never get over the hump.
So was that something that you were able to do for them? Like come in and figure out how to fix the problem? Because obviously, if you're breaking even every year, that's great, but you're not making any money.
No, you're not. You can't develop any real wealth inside the organization. And a lot of them were afraid to grow. A lot of them didn't understand.
Afraid to grow?
Yeah, because they didn't understand. They felt like this is all they could handle. They didn't work with their management team and give them some bandwidth for them to actually take on some of the responsibility. A lot of micromanagement, a lot of not really understanding what they had or what they were doing. Why? Because they weren't looking at their financial statements, or they weren't looking at real financial statements. They were
What do you mean not looking at real financial statements?
They were working out of their checkbook. There was still some money at the end of the month. They weren't looking at real financial data and understanding the areas that they were weak in. And look, the reality is what we were able to do, and what I was able to do, was identify the holes inside the organization, the operational efficiencies of the people working on the ground. And I covered multiple industries: trucking, car dealerships, service businesses, manufacturing companies, you name it, we touch it. HVAC, construction, multiple.
Second. It got dark. There we go.
You should cut off now. We can do more tomorrow. No, we should.
Just wrap up. Because we're not going to be here tomorrow. We can't shoot from a different location.
Okay.
Okay. So you, what were you doing for small businesses? They like.
So we would go in. We'd actually a team would go in and do an analysis on a company. They would go in and look at how they were performing and identify areas that they needed to focus on. What we would do is we'd actually develop an action plan off of that data that they were looking at. And then we would go in side by side, working with clients 2 to 3 days a week. And we'd sit with them we'd look under the covers, lift the kimono, look at everything that was happening from a business perspective. We'd sit with the management team, we'd sit with the owners, and we would look at what they were doing, how they were doing it, and then come up with processes and improvements that they needed to make from a business perspective. Now understand, we were in COVID. In a lot of cases, businesses were struggling in COVID just to make dollars and to be able to do day-to-day workflow. What we did was we actually looked at what they were doing, and I can tell you, there was maybe 2 or 3 businesses when I was there that we actually cut employees. We helped them grow during some of the most toughest economic times in this country's history. Not the toughest, because that's a depression, but the reality is we went in and we helped them grow and develop their businesses and go after areas that they weren't looking at. New areas from a sales perspective. We made people more efficient in the office so that the teams were able to do more things from a day-to-day perspective. We showed them how to hire and how to train and how to bring new people inside the organization, how to collect money, because let's be honest, a lot of you don't collect the money you need from the clients that you have, and you're afraid to go get the funds.
What do you mean?
That are outstanding. Accounts receivable, they weren't collecting their receivables. They were paying too much out, but they were not collecting the money that was due to them from a client perspective.
Is that an issue? A lot of people.
It's an issue in almost every small business. And the biggest thing, and one of the biggest areas that most small businesses don't understand, is cash flow and cash flow forecasting. Having a dollar in hand means a lot more than having a dollar owed to you. It's important for you to bring those dollars in so that you can take that money and put it back into your business for reinvestment, and to take some money out so that you have profitability from a business perspective.
What was your typical ROI on a project?
So at the rates that we were charging, it was somewhere between 5 times and 10 times from an ROI perspective. So projects ran from $100,000 to $450,000, and we would give them $2 to $3 to $7 million worth of profitability out of that over a 3-year period. But look, the reality is the rates that we were charging for the firm that I was working with were very high for small and medium-sized businesses.
And you were still doing pretty good return on investment.
We were doing real returns on investments. We were actually taking businesses that were losing money and making them profitable after paying for our expenses.
Wow. That's crazy.
And companies that, from a record perspective, some businesses like, one of the dealerships that I did work with, they'd make a few $100,000 a year, they'd lose a few $100,000 a year, and they did that over a 20 or 30 year period. We turned that business into millions of dollars of profitability.
Wow.
Not 5 or 600,000, but $1 to $2 million of profitability, and we were paying people more money than they ever made before.
Profitability, like
real profitability.
Wow. And were they profitable before?
Sometimes yes, but a lot of times they were break even. And the reality was, not only were they more profitable than they ever were before, but they paid their employees better than they ever paid before, with pay for performance plans.
So what were some of the biggest things that you noticed walking into businesses? That when you walk into a business and you see these things, you know that they need your help.
They weren't tracking how people were performing. They weren't collecting the money that they needed from a day-to-day perspective. No sales growth. They didn't have sales operation plans where they were getting their salespeople to get out and work with clients and bring deals in and getting deals closed.
Well, what do you see are some of the most tactical things people can do to improve tomorrow?
So 2 things. One, where are there inefficiencies from an operations perspective in their business? So if you're manufacturing or a service industry, where are your people not being productive from a day-to-day perspective? And we measured it not in days and weeks, but in hours. So if your team is not efficient 2 hours on an 8-hour day, and look, world-class organizations, 87 to 90% efficiency in a day is world-class.
Really?
That means working 7 out of an 8-hour day.
How is that world-class?
And the Japanese environment is like 94 or 95%.
Yeah.
But them being effective for that amount of time in a day, they're not, because of inefficiencies. So a simple case in point, we're on a production floor of a manufacturing business, and they're doing work at their workstations. They had to walk across the building to get equipment for them to come back to their workstation to do work.
Really?
So when they were doing that, they would lose 10 to 15 minutes every time they had to go to use a piece of equipment each way. Because what happens, we're human beings. We want to have a conversation with people. What we did in one facility is we actually moved 70% of that tools that they need on a daily basis, we moved it to their workstations.
Wow.
So for a $25,000, $30,000 investment, we got $800,000 worth of efficiency from the people that were doing the work.
Really?
With this small investment in tools for these few people.
That's crazy. Mm-hmm. And that's just one example. And this is something that I find interesting, is that was you working at an agency. Now obviously you went from there, you covered some time, mm-hmm. right, from there, and now we're here.
Right.
So what is it that you're looking to accomplish with PiVoT that you couldn't do with one of these other organizations that made you so driven outside of just working with me, right? Like, I know I'm such a,
So I always wanted to help small businesses. My father struggled at different points from a business perspective because he was a great business person, but he didn't understand what had to happen to handle change and things that were happening from an environment perspective. And he struggled in different times. If he had somebody who was in his ear talking to him about different things that would happen from a business processing perspective, it would have saved him some downturns in his industry. Yeah. I want to be able to take that expertise that I've developed over these last 30 years and help small business owners grow grow their businesses, develop their teams, and take their businesses to the next level. Because the opportunity is there, you just have to take it. And I'm going to be honest, the problem in most small businesses aren't the people working in those businesses. It's you, the business owners, because you've learned a business a certain way and you're not looking at it open-minded and fixing the problems and the changes in the organization. You need an independent outsider that's been doing that for a long time to come in, see where the problems are, identify where the issues are, and this, which is the most important thing. Anybody can come in and tell you where a problem is inside an organization. They can. People that are smart from a business perspective will identify where the areas are. But what they can't do is they can't implement change. And I can tell you, me and my team are implementation experts. We know how to go in, identify the problem, and then not only come up with the solution, but implement it. So we work side by side with the people inside your organization to really handle change. We get them comfortable with what they're doing. We're going to sit alongside them and show them what they need to do, how to do it, and how to execute against it. And then we don't leave. We want to work with you so that over time it sticks. And look, anytime you change a process, there's going to be slippage and you're going to go back. We don't want it to slip and go back. We want to stay with you to make sure that that happens and that you have a strong basis and we develop that platform for you to go forward into the future and take your company to the next level. And that gives you real sustainable growth and ROI that is going to make a big difference for you in the long run.
That's incredible. And I think, one, I'm grateful to be in business with you, and having seen the work ethic of your team, of yourself, and seeing how much you actually genuinely care about these companies, these entrepreneurs, and helping them is inspiring. Because the thing that I always got frustrated with when I'd work with other consultants is that all the consultants from a lot of these big firms, you're just another number. Mm-hmm. You're another accounts receivable. You're another tick on the belt. To them, they don't care about your business. No. They're not there answering a phone call at 8:30, 9 o'clock when something happens and you don't know what to do. They're not there for you when you need them, and they're not here to help you when they're out here and you didn't pay this, whatever. The difference that I've seen for myself, for the way I wanted PiVoT to be from the ground up, is we're about the small businesses. I'm not sitting here, don't get me wrong, I could find big clients and take big clients. I purposefully don't take these huge corporate clients because I know that I can be way more effective at helping smaller businesses. And I can't do that if I'm saturated 90% of the time with one client, which, don't get me wrong, is great, but financially, but I'm in that same boat of there's so many companies that need cybersecurity work, that need digital marketing, that need better websites, that need SEO, that need full business consulting, but aren't willing to either pay for it or they've paid for it in the past and gotten burned by a big company. And the truth for me has always been, how can I help small companies? Because I see these big threat lockers and all these big, I'm shutting them up because they're a garbage company and you can take that to the bank. It's just from all the experiences I've had with them, they treat their big clients like kings. If you're not spending over $1 million with them, you're not relevant. And for me, when I look at a company and I tell a business owner, I am here to help you. I am here to help your business. I am here to make sure that you and your data and your security is my priority. And I'm in here with you and you can depend on me. It's different because I actually care about you. I don't like these big companies, you're a rounding error on their business sheet.
So I've had clients that had ransomware put on their computers because they did not have security in place, or they had security and it wasn't working properly. I had clients that had websites for them to bring in ads and leads from a business perspective that did not function in the current environment. And they had wasted $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in setting this up with a larger organization, and it was never modified, updated, or changed with what was going on from a current platform perspective. It was disheartening. They had pumped valuable dollars, hard-earned dollars, into something to help them that they never maintained or had a problem maintaining going forward.
Yeah.
Nor were they told what would make sense. The whole idea, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do this with William was not only are we going to be able to implement change in an organization, the platforms that they're working on, and look, the reality is the way people would advertise and they did in the past doesn't work anymore. It doesn't. You need to get out to mass people. You need to get out. People need to see who you are. And look, it's the world of the phone, right? From your phone, you can do all of your business. And when people are looking at products or purchases or services, they're going to their phone, they're doing a search. If they're sitting in the car next to somebody, or if they're in transit, or if they're in their office, or they're on their couch, they flip open their phone, they're going to do a search, and they're going to look for who the top 4 or 5 companies in that area that they should be talking to. And that's who they're calling.
Yep.
The idea here is William and his team are going to put you in those top 5 companies in that area. And then what we're going to do is we're going to help you implement and get things done from a sales and operations perspective. So not only are you going to be number 1 on that from a search perspective, and we're going to increase traffic to your website and into your portal, but we're also going to help your salespeople effectively get and acquire those companies and executing from a sales perspective and getting those deals inside the door. And then 2, making sure from an operations and product perspective, we're going to be a low-cost producer and provide your product to those clients at a reasonable rate. That's what our goals are.
And that's been the name of the game. Mm-hmm. We're a young business, or a nimble business with a lot of experience and with a lot of availability across the board to help in any area you need. And this is the truth. This is going to be a conversation that we're going to keep going on. Like for me, I'm blessed to not live that far away. And I'm excited to have conversations like this often. And we've had a lot of these conversations in private, just sitting, playing cards at the end of a night, but being able to share some of this information. And as we dig into conversations about business, about topics, we'll come on and we'll talk about different areas of expertise and things we see. Sometimes it'll be me asking you questions. Sometimes it'll be you asking me questions. Mm-hmm. I'm a young I'm young, and I get that. And I've had clients push back before because I'm a young kid walking into a client. What do I know? And
adult.
I'm a young adult. I say kid. I'm a young adult. And it's one of those things of like being able to marry the youth, the energy with true experience. It changes the game. And I'm blessed to be able to, not just call you my father, but call you my business partner. And as we go through this, and we're going to crush the competition in the best way possible. Not by going after them, but by helping businesses succeed more effectively.
And most importantly, help you really change what you're doing from a business perspective, driving growth, being able to employ more people, and bringing profitability to you and your businesses.
And that's it for this first episode of PiVoT Business Solutions. Like I'd said earlier in the night, if you are looking if anything in this podcast sounds like something where you might need help, whether that's in the consulting side that my father runs and operates with his experience which expands beyond what we just talked about today, or in my area of cybersecurity, digital marketing, SEO, website development, please reach out, info@pivotbusinesssolution.com. We're more than happy to sit down with you on a 30-minute to an hour-long Zoom call to see if we might be right for you to actually have a conversation. Because as great as email is and text is, we can't really get a true understanding unless we sit down and have a conversation. Outside of that, I hope you guys have a great day. And you have anything else you want to touch on?
Have a great day, and I look forward to speaking to you in the future.